Untitled on the beat.
What's good, everyone? It's your boy Nati with another video for the channel. Welcome back to DMVSportsZone, and I'm back. I'm back here with Noah for another one of these fantasy preview videos. Sorry for missing out on the last one, but from what I saw, when I heard, Noah did an amazing job. So I'm glad that we can do this thing again this week. And yeah, let's just get started. Let's get into things. First and foremost, Noah, can you recap your projections from last week, the SportAI official projections from last week?
Yeah, for sure. We had a huge week. Some of our highlights include a lot of players. Like I said, we want to focus for you guys to find out the power of AI, to find those hidden gems, those waiver wire guys. Some of them are still on waiver wires, including T. Higgins, DeAndre Swift, Debo Samuel, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, Rob Gronkowski was the cover of our video for last week, and he went off. So we're really proud of our picks, and these are guys that, more importantly, are not just waiver wire gems, but they'll be solid players for the rest of the season. DeAndre Swift may have Adrian Peterson there, but his role is going to trend upward as he's the best pass catcher among the three running backs in Detroit right now. Gronkowski now has O.J. Howard out of the way, with him going on IR possibly for the rest of the year. Cameron Brate not performing that well. You know, Gronkowski's got it. Sky's the limit. And T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins, Claypool takes a lot of the attention, but T. Higgins another guy to look at. Healthy A.J. Green, healthy Boyd, and still is the Burrow's go-to weapon in the end zone. And for fantasy, that can make or break a league. And well, let's get started before I get to reveal too much, but we're very happy for the past week. Yeah. And like Nati always mentioned, you want to sign up for the beta and get that power of the artificial intelligence on your hands, check the bio below.
For sure. Well, of course, make sure to include that in the description. But yeah, your SportAI's picks from last week were they've been consistently good, like since the start of the season. I know you're very excited for it, and I am too. It's just someone who subscribes to those alerts every week and stuff. But yeah, guys, seriously, we say this every week, but subscribe to the alerts, get involved with SportAI, and just really keep up to date with all their projections, because they are top notch. They are a top notch platform, and
all for free. Yeah, don't worry. No catch.
Free fantasy advice. Who doesn't like that? But yeah, having said that, thank you for the short recap of last week's projections. So on to week 7, right? It's crazy that we're already at week 7 at this point. We're almost
through
the season. As we get started, every single video, Noah, can you give me one fantasy sleeper that will break out in week 7 and that fantasy players should have in their lineups?
For sure. Like I mentioned about last week, we had a lot of wins, and now that we're in week 7, we're starting to level the playing field. The sleepers have emerged, the rookies have emerged, so it's starting to be a lot tougher to find that gem. So that's why we want to go with a true sleeper, someone that's not owned in even 50% of fantasy leagues, and that person is, like we mentioned last week, I have to say it again, I'm sorry, it's Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah, okay.
Rob Gronkowski is only owned in 38% of Yahoo leagues. And last time I checked...
Noah, do you want to tell the people what happened in our league with Rob Gronkowski in the draft this year?
He got overdrafted in our league, and he got overdrafted in a lot of leagues, and I think a lot of people had too many the third round, too many expectations for him. Keep in mind, he's a player that, coming off an entire year off, had to get used to the new offense and had to build rapport again with Brady, even though it's kind of weird. They've been over a decade of success. But now it's the time for Gronkowski. Gronkowski is the primary end zone target of Tom Brady in one of the most electric defenses and offenses in the league. Like I mentioned before, previously in the video, O.J. Howard out for probably the rest of the season. Cameron Brate's been relegated to more of a blocking tight end. Rob Gronkowski is not going to be a one-shot wonder. He is our number 1 sleeper again for this week.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all your points, Gronk. He is, of course, not what he used to be, but he's getting the opportunities this week. And Noah and I, like we discussed this, but I was even early in the offseason, even before Brady signed with the Buccaneers, I was super high on that defense, especially the improvement that they had with Todd Bowles last year. And all their talent didn't really mesh together like completely well last year, but I just knew they had a lot of talent. Every single offseason, I go into the offseason looking at all the teams, looking at all their rosters, and usually predict a certain roster to be amazing and to outperform expectations and stuff based off their talent and stuff. You know who that team was, Noah? That I predicted? 49ers based off their talent, and they made it to the Super Bowl.
I think that the Buccaneers are this year's 49ers. Beyond a fantasy perspective, I mean, you look at the Buccaneers defense. Who would have thought to draft the Buccaneers defense, and now they are arguably the best fantasy defense in the entire NFL.
I'm telling you,
they're not going to slow down.
Yeah, they have talent all over that defense, and now they finally just had a quarterback who doesn't turn it over all the time and doesn't, force the defense on the field every possession and stuff. So their defense is balling, and finally, right, they have all that talent. For me, fantasy sleeper, not really a sleeper, I guess. Like he's someone who is somewhat known by everyone who plays fantasy football, especially Noah, because I know we actually chatted about this before last week's games, and if whether or not I should pick him up. But Travis Fulgham, the wide receiver for the Eagles. I think the real plus with Fulgham the last few weeks is that his opportunities are just growing and growing. And now Zach Ertz, who tied Fulgham with the most receiving targets last week, is actually going to be out for an extended period of time. And I know the Eagles are getting back DeSean Jackson, who, if you don't put him in bubble wrap, he's going to get injured after like 2 snaps. Always gets injured as a Washington fan. Washington fans, like, we know that. But also have Alshon Jeffrey, who's very much the same way, I guess. And I know they're potentially returning this week, but Fulgham has definitely earned his right to be a starter in this Eagles, or if not, gain a very substantial role in that group. And I think Carson Wentz, he struggled right at the gate, but he has had a pretty good last couple of games, especially last week, right? I believe he had almost 30 fantasy points in that mini comeback, right, against the Ravens. And Fulgham's had 18 receptions for 284 yards and 2 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. So, again, he's been balling. He's playing against the Giants secondary that, outside of slowing the number one target in Amari Cooper and Terry McLaurin, they've actually been pretty vulnerable against second, third string receivers and stuff. And Fulgham obviously falls into that category. So I think a lot of people might be fading Fulgham this week, but I think he's definitely someone who you should at least consider starting for.
I think I agree. To a fault, though. He's a boomer bust for sure. A couple factors. It's actually really interesting. His fantasy outlook improves with the return of Jeffrey or DeSean Jackson. Primary reason for that, beyond the analytics part of things, is because James Bradbury of the New York Giants is suddenly become a lockdown corner. If he gets matched up with Fulgham, particularly with Ertz out, and they only have Burton as their number one tight end, I see Fulgham getting shut down. So actually, Fulgham owners, I would be cautious and hope that Sean Jackson comes back healthy. Otherwise, there's limited options with Sanders even out, and Fulgham's going to get double-teamed, triple-teamed, or solo coverage with one of the best corners in football. So he's a boomer bust for sure, but I do see the sleeper potential. He is on the upper 50 percentile of performers this week from SportAI's calculations. So we have hope for him, but there are a lot of reasons to be worried. I would say he's a flex, maybe a high risk, high reward wide receiver 3.
No, I completely agree. I was going to add that caveat in. If Alshon Jeffrey or DeSean Jackson are not fully healthy and stuff, then obviously Fulgham's going to get that shadow coverage. But I mean, a little bit fingers crossed, not as a Washington fan, but more so as a fan, that he will have at least one other healthy target in that receiver. Yeah, that's it for the sleepers of the week. Again, if you're ever deciding between my predictions and SportAI's predictions, go with SportAI because they've been balling out last couple.
Nati's picks been solid as well. Appreciate that, but I think that great minds think alike. A lot of the sleepers have been similar, so can't go wrong with any of the picks that we mention every week.
For sure. After the sleepers, as we do every week, Noah, can you give me 2 great fantasy plays this week?
Mm-hmm. Nati definitely shout out for the gas up for sure for our predictions. But I assure you that for the 7th week in a row, you can trust these next 2 picks. Let's go quarterback. Really interestingly enough, it's a quarterback that was owned in a lot of leagues that's starting to see a lot of people drop him. Similar to Gronkowski, he's still owned in 80% of leagues in Yahoo Fantasy for Yahoo Fantasy. So he's not necessarily always there, but if he's there, Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford is going against a very vulnerable Atlanta Falcons defense. And if you notice very carefully, if you look beyond the fantasy sports analytics, he has thrown for the lowest career passing attempts in the past 6 years of his career. He's being held back. So people are mentioning that he only had 1 touchdown last week, but that was in very limited attempts. But Matt Patricia is opening up the offensive playbook. They're getting Golladay back. Marvin Jones is healthy. And a good sign is that from our calculations, Marvin Jones is trending up as well. Kenny Golladay, we had as our fantasy MVP last week, was a great, solid pick coming back from injury. DeAndre Swift is coming out of that backfield. We are confident in Matthew Stafford. If he's still there, he's going to do a lot of good things. Particularly with Lamar Jackson on a bye week. If you want some production, I'm not going to say he's going to replace Lamar Jackson, but his numbers will be dang near close. Our other pick, let's change it up. I mean, we haven't mentioned a running back in a while, and people are a little curious about who we find as sleepers there. Let's go to Tampa and Detroit with Ronald Jones and DeAndre Swift. Both of them huge sleepers for this week. Unfortunately, Ronald Jones, thanks to Fournette going down, people notice Ronald Jones' rise, and Ronald Jones has the Bruce Arians confidence. Even when Fournette returns, he's going to only be a 20-30% snap back. So Fournette's out of the picture the rest of the season. It's Ronald Jones time at Tampa. He's going to be ironically, another Jones, Aaron Jones level talent.
That's who I thought of.
Similar how the Packers had Aaron Jones breakout in 2018. This is Ronald Jones' breakout year. He's a big back that goes out of the backfield, does everything for that team. He had almost 90% of the carries last week and the past 2 weeks, and he's going to be against a great defensive matchup, really struggling against the run. He's going to run all over them. DeAndre Swift, same thing. Adrian Peterson may get the ground carries, but Swift always saves the day with the receiving and for the screens. The Lions, like I said, are desperate to win at this point of the Matt Patricia's tenure, as he's might get fired if he doesn't win a couple games soon. So they are going guns blazing. That's why Matt Stafford, Golladay, Jones, Swift, every single one of these guys are trending upwards. The Lions are a team that are going to be slept on the offensive side of the ball, particularly against the Falcons. DeAndre Swift, big game.
Yeah, I mean, those are 2 great picks. Ronald Jones, all I have to say about him is that he's finally living up to his 2nd round draft pick. Because for some time, I was really doubting that pick. A lot of people were doubting that pick, and he just did. But it's very fortunate, right, to have a quarterback like the GOAT, right, under center and up and not throw the ball into the other team's hands every single time. But yeah, no, he's been balling out and definitely is a great play. My 2 great plays. So I'll mention someone who you already mentioned a little bit after this first pick, and I'm not a homer when I say this, but I think Terry McLaurin is actually a great play this week. That surprised a lot of people because the Washington offense has been struggling and stuff. But Terry McLaurin, he's been stuck in those absolutely dreadful offenses the last 2 years in the league, unfortunately. But this guy, he's just he's outperforming any sort of expectations. He's had to date Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, and Alex Smith as quarterbacks. Alex Smith obviously off of an injury that he sustained 2 years ago and stuff. So not great quarterback play whatsoever, but he just continues to get targets. He's top 10 in the NFL in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. And he's now going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense that has given up the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. I know they have Trevon Diggs, Stephon Diggs' brother. and he does offer some potential. But guys, that Cowboys defense, that pass defense specifically, is just not good. And I think he's going to get a bunch of targets and is going to have a bigger game than his low end wide receiver 2 games, which we've seen so far.
Yeah, McLaurin's definitely slept on. I mean, through week 5, he was top 5 in the entire league in receiving yards with one of the worst passing situations in the league. Terry McLaurin's a baller in real life and in fantasy. On our end, SportAI's end, he's receiver trending upwards, so I definitely agree with that sleeper pick there.
Sure. And I'm going to go with another receiver in T. Higgins.
Hey, okay. I agree with that. We agree with that one for sure.
For sure, yeah. Noah's been, oh my gosh, he's been talking about this man for so long. And I'm glad I picked him up in one of my leagues. Didn't pick him up in our league because Noah did ahead of me. But no, he's been balling, man. He is someone who is sort of in the mainstream at this point, maybe not completely. Putting up consistently good receiving games since week 3 of the season and looks to be a legitimate stud at wide receiver. And he looks to be one of the best, if not the best, red zone target for Joe Burrow this season. And despite the Bengals' struggles on offenses throughout several points of the season, he just keeps getting a ton of targets in the red zone and really on that offense in general. So this week he's going up against, just like Terry, he's going up with Cleveland Browns defense that has given up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. And, you know, a lot of people mentioned Denzel Ward, and this guy's a really good corner in this league. But at the same time, he's probably, with the emergence of A.J. Green, he's probably going to be covering A.J. Green all game, if not Tyler Boyd, who are probably ahead on the depth chart, ahead of T. Higgins. So I think Higgins is in for a great week this week as well. And not a sleeper at this point, but he's definitely a great player.
For sure. We actually have him in the top 10 performers for this week at receiver. So really excited. I think that T. Higgins believers, whoever was, listening to us early enough, who got him, don't worry. He is a flex wide receiver, solid wide receiver 3 rest of the year. Yeah. They have the entire Bengals team healthy. And actually, from an offense perspective, their offensive line is so bad that they're finding themselves going heavily to the passing game. Mixon is going out of the backfield. That's why Mixon is still a relevant fantasy back because he can go out of that backfield. But they are throwing the ball and they're going guns blazing. And with John Ross requesting a trade, he's now out of the picture. So whatever hope of competition is pretty much gone.
Washington pick up the phone like now.
yeah. I mean, Washington needs anybody at this point.
Anybody, everybody. All of this should be sellers for the most part, but they need young receivers.
Yeah, high risk but high rewards from John Ross on that end. But T. Higgins, I completely agree with you. He's going to be arguably one of the biggest sleepers in the entire year.
Yeah. Having said that, Noah can give me 2 disappointing fantasy duds this week that will unfortunately.
Yeah, so we've been, high on one guy that we mentioned week to week as a sleeper, and he has been relatively a sleeper considering everyone doesn't think that he's good. Even though he's been doing the best of his situation, has actually had a couple decent fantasy performances. We're going to go with Daniel Jones and the New York Giants for this week. We have Carson Wentz trending upward, Daniel Jones trending down. Interestingly enough, Sterling Shepard may return, but Darius Slayton's health is in question. Even if both of them are in their running back core, that's huge questions. They have one of the worst offensive lines in the league still. Daniel Jones is doing the best he can. He's scrambling, and they're trying to change the playbook for him. But the analytics don't point towards his direction. Daniel Jones, huge disappointment this week. The other disappointment, actually, we're going to get a lot of flame for this, but not Travis. That's one of the other guys. We actually have Claypool as our disappointment this week.
Okay.
So Chase Claypool, great performance last week. But I think I wanted to mention him because I'm not saying he's going to do bad. But right now, people are upgrading him as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 even on a weaker team. I want to hold the brakes there. Hold the brakes. Our rankings for the foreseeable future for the next 6 weeks show him as a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. But at the same time, we are seeing a trend of people trading big for him. A lot of people are trying to trade for him after the lucky people got him off waivers and people were selling him high. I would hold the brakes. Not necessarily going to be disappointment in terms of a complete bust, but the expectations are getting a little bit out of control. Let's hold it back because Deontay Johnson's supposed to come back soon. Claypool has earned his place on the lineup as an offensive threat, particularly with Juju becoming more of a slot receiver. But I will say he has a much tougher matchup this week than he did last week. Still a flex, similar to Fulgham, a high risk, high reward wide receiver 3. But don't be trading your number 1 or number 2 running back for him yet. Let's hold the brakes. He will be a good asset, but I think for this week he will be a fantasy dud.
That's gonna walk waves around the fantasy community this week, but
Full Saban, but we trust the machine over here, and I'm glad you trust the machine too. So we will see.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying that's definitely bold and definitely a thing that if and only if you're watching this video, you will know. From SportAI, so that's why you guys should watch every single week. But for my 2 disappointing fantasy duds, I'm going to go with someone first who has actually been balling out in the last couple of weeks and actually has averaged around 30 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. And, he's getting a limited amount of passing attempts, but again, he's been balling out. But I'll have him as my dud this week, and Ryan Tannehill, the quarterback for the Titans.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think this week Tannehill is going it's going to have a very tough test. Probably up to now in his game against the Steelers defense. That
showdown, baby, undefeated.
Yeah. Well, not the best when it comes to limiting the production of quarterbacks. It's still top 5 defense overall, if not higher than that, as we all know. So I just do not see Tannehill having a great game solely based off the matchup this week. I think the Titans offense might be pretty decent, especially when you have a guy like Derrick Henry running roughshod on defenses every single week. But I don't know. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is in for a great week. I don't think he's in for a complete, utter disaster like Aaron Rodgers last week. But I think maybe 10 to 15 point range, or maybe 10 to 17 point range, something like that. That's what you want to see out of a quarterback 1 this week. But yeah, that's one of my picks. My other pick is actually someone who I know is owned in many, many leagues and probably is started in many leagues, but has just not been performing in the last couple of weeks. In Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver for the Rams, had a nice little hot streak from weeks 2 to 4, as he usually does, as I'm very well aware of from last year when this guy was going crazy for like 6-7 game stretch, led me to be 5-0 that season. Ultimately, I became 8-5 because I lost so many games after that, but that's another story for another. Kupp, he's just not been doing well the last couple of weeks, and he's been playing against relatively decent middle of the pack pass defenses in the Eagles, Bills, and Giants. And again, like usually when he has these sort of hot streaks early in the season, he usually just falls off face of the map towards the end of the season, and he's sort of trending that way in my opinion. He's averaging 8.5 targets a game. That pass-heavy Rams offense, right? If it was a run-heavy offense, and that would be a different story, right? 8.5 targets, okay, that's decent, But in a pass-heavy scheme, for him to only average 8.5 targets a game with all the talent that he has, that is a little problematic. And he continues. This is something that irritates me so much. He continues to go off the field whenever the Rams run 2 tight end sets. He isn't that one other receiver opposite of Robert Woods, which a lot of people don't know, or they just think that he is. He's just not. They oftentimes have like out there, or just other boundary receivers, and take out their slot receivers altogether. So that's problematic. And most importantly, he plays against the toughest defense in the NFL right now, the Chicago Bears, who I know, and I know you know very well, right? I'm a current resident of the city, and I know the Bears defense is just running crazy right now. They don't even really need above average quarterback play at this point, even though they're sort of kind of maybe not getting it. So I would fade Kupp if I were you this week, and maybe even hopefully have him get going towards next week against Miami, or even after the Rams week 9 bye. But I do not have him as a top flight starter this week.
Definitely agree with that. Cooper Kupp is a receiver that's trending down, we say, for the rest of the year, beyond not just this week. A couple reasons, not only from the analytics perspective, but from the real life perspective. Robert Woods is becoming the true number one. There was battles between them last year with Cooks in the picture, but now we expected, if we were going to see him have a breakout fantasy year, for him to separate himself, but the exact opposite has happened. Robert Woods has separated himself as the number one receiver. Reynolds is another huge threat to this target, as they're a giant receiver at 6'3". He's the one that's going on the 2 tight end sets, the block, the catch. They don't need a slot receiver in that type of offensive set. You have Everett. You have so many more targets taking away. Henderson and Malcolm Brown. They're an unusual offense in the fact that they don't really have much of an identity. Robert Woods is a good player, but if he's your number one receiver and Henderson and Brown are your 1A, 1B, the Rams have way too many questions on offense. Jared Goff, not a bad quarterback, not a great quarterback. They don't know what he is, which is not a good sign for a guy you signed to be your franchise quarterback. So the Rams have a lot of question marks everywhere. They, even 2 years ago were considered to be a future Super Bowl contender every single year. Now suddenly we could see a rebuild coming in the future. So I agree with that. And I'm sorry for the Cup fans, the UNC guys, but not looking good.
Not much to add there. Pretty much covered all bases there. But I guess as we finish off these videos every single week, Noah, give me what the people want in the fantasy MVP for week 7.
Okay, our fantasy MVP. I think this is a great segment because, let's be honest here, a lot of times the fantasy MVP is not going to be on waivers, and you're probably going to trade for him. But you want to see the guy who's going to break out the most this week. We have someone that I think is going to be pretty surprising. What we consider an MVP, like I mentioned every week, is not just necessarily the big name player. It's someone that'll help your team win. And we have our MVP as Darren Waller of the Oakland Raiders.
Hey, that's okay. I like it. Not like that typical, Alvin Kamara picks that I'm about to say, but that's a great pick. Keep going.
Kamara is a great player. The reason why we, same with Galladay last week, same this week with Waller. The MVP of a fantasy team is someone that's going to take you over the top. And the tight end position, very, very shallow. That's why, Gronkowski can be vital for your team. But Darren Waller, coming off a bye week, completely healthy, trending upwards, has massive amount of targets on a Raiders team that is shooting the lights out. Like it says, 38 against the Chiefs, solid defense. Derek Carr suddenly becoming a legitimate QB2 in fantasy and in real life an elite quarterback. Darren Waller, I think our numbers, I trust them, and his numbers are trending up. We actually have him long-term in the season, believe it or not. We have him over George Kittle by the end of the season, by season's end.
I know a lot of people might be surprised by that, but I kept telling people, like, I had the option to either have Michael Thomas or George Kittle through like trades and stuff, and I ended up thinking, you know what, I'm gonna have Michael Thomas, even though George Kittle is gonna, play for a couple more games, because of the fact that I knew from previous years that George Kittle, well, yes, when you look at him, he is probably the best tight end, if not second best tight end in the league, and is one of the best fantasy tight ends by default, really, but he has very inconsistent games, right? He has very big boom games, but then you get like 6, 7 half PPR points, and that's a little problematic, right? For a guy, you want to be consistent, even though I know the tight end position is just very poor in fantasy right now. But that's a very good pick, Darren Waller going out there. And yeah, I'm gonna go the opposite route and go to even more established guys that I know everything on the roster, but I guess my sort of thinking around this is like you should be even more confident in these guys being in your team. And I really even couldn't choose between these two players who play on the same team, really, because I think they're both. I think Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones are probably my co-MVP.
Ooh, okay.
I legit could not pick one MVP, as I just said. Even if this Packers offense did struggle last week, I know they look terrible, right? Great quarterback Aaron Rodgers had, I believe, 6 total points, right? In fantasy, and just absolutely horrid. The entire offense was horrid. I get that. But after a week 3 period, where he was just out, right, because of injuries, bye weeks, whatever, Devontae Adams got a lot of targets in that Packers receiving group. He is literally the only very good wide receiver in that group right now, which is
healthy. Yeah,
that's healthy too. I think that's an indictment on the Packers front office, but that's another story. Going with Jordan Love as their first round pick, but no, Devontae Adams is getting all the targets, and even against that very, 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 very tough Bucs defense that I know Noah just talked about. He corralled 6 catches off 10 targets for 61 yards, and those numbers might not be the most eye-popping, but after that extended break and playing a great defense, he still got those targets, still got those catches, even while the rest of the offense was bad. And now Adams gets to play a Houston defense that got absolutely torched last week against the Titans on the ground and through the air, and now fully healthy, right, for the first time, fully healthy. And really the same reasons apply for Aaron Jones, right? For him being a co-MVP, who just continues to get fed in the Packers offense no matter what the game script is, unless the Packers are just totally out of the game, because we saw that last week, right? Aaron Jones was ceding carries to Jamal Williams and Dillard, I believe, in that backfield. But that was only because the game was completely out of reach. But even if the Packers season, this guy just gets a lot of carries, and I routinely thought that he'll eventually challenge for that number 1 overall running back spot in fantasy.
Oh, okay.
And he's now going up against the Houston defense this week that has given up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs this season. And we saw what happened with Derrick Henry last week. Berserk on that defense. So I believe, and you guys should look out for big games out of Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones this week, and really the entire Packers offense as a whole. I really believe that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm really curious to see how Tanyan, Adams, and Jones are going to mix together. We have all 3 of them in the top 25% of their position rest of the season. So the numbers suggest good things, but we don't know how that will be expressed week to week. Will it be all 3 going off at once? Will it be a rotation? Jones, Adams going off, Tanyan, Adams going off. So there's question marks in a good way, because you know that all 3 of them are going to explode eventually from the course of the season. But we don't know if it's all going to be at once, if we don't know it's going to be in little bursts. So whoever has the Packers offensive players, have faith. One bad game doesn't define a season. Aaron Rodgers still a top 10 QB. Aaron Jones still a top 5 running back. Jones is going to be, I think, the real MVP. The real MVP. So that's a great pick. But I'm excited to see Tanyan Adams as well. All 3 of them are the top echelon of our fantasy picks for not only the rest of the season, but for this week. So I'm not looking good for the Texans. That's all I'm going to say.
I completely agree, again, with all your points. I do worry about Adams long term just because this guy always seems to get injured throughout the season and stuff. But this week, play those guys with confidence, as you probably already know. But I'm solidifying it for you. But thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, this is probably going to be the end of our weekly preview video for Week 7 of the fantasy football season. It's always a pleasure to have Noah, the official expert on these videos, representing SportAI, a wonderful platform that, again, you guys should all subscribe to, all get alerts from, because they're really very good platform. And again, free. Who doesn't like free fantasy football advice that is actually credible, right? Like, use it. But yeah, thank you again, Noah. Any last thoughts before we completely wrap up?
Yeah. The team here at SportAI is excited to bring artificial intelligence fantasy sports, and we're excited to bring that info for free while you guys are waiting for the mobile app to come out for the beta test of the test. We've been getting great support, and our user base is growing, and we want to make sure that we give the power to the player. So And we're excited that all the picks have been helping, hundreds of people so far. And we're hoping for thousands more, maybe millions more, right? You never know. But, we're taking it one day at a time. And I want everyone that's watching the video to take your fantasy team one at a time. You see week to week, we always talk about it, but you shouldn't give up on players too early. You should always keep an eye out for the next big sleeper. Because it doesn't matter if you start 0-5 or 5-0. Your team always can have a chance to lose.
Like you're literally speaking it like what happened. But yeah, go on. Sorry.
So you could always lose every week, and you could always afford to get some new players. So we're glad to bring you that information from the great platform that is DMVSportsZone.
Yeah, that's a great way to sign off. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the DMVSportsZone channel. We try to post fire content on here as much as possible, as well as our Instagram page, all lowercase DMVSportsZone, and our Twitter page at DMVSportsZone. But that being said, that's it for this video. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and have a great rest of your week and a great fantasy football weekend as always. Peace.